This is Raul Lopez, and you're listening to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish? The path to success isn't easy. For minorities and people of color, many attempt this journey with little to no guidance. Join me as I sit down with individuals who share their stories of perseverance so that together we can learn how to say success in Spanglish. What's good, mi gente? It's your boy Raul. Welcome back. On today's episode, I have one of my best friends and the guy who actually married me and my wife, Rene Garcia. How's it going, Rene?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here, brother.
So your official title that you sent me is Rene Garcia, LMFT, LPC, LCDC. So that's a lot of fucking letters to put at the end of someone's name. So just to kind of give everybody background on Rene. Rene is a psychotherapist based in the North Dallas area. He spent a majority of his career providing therapy in both inpatient and outpatient settings for substance use disorders until opening his private practice, Garcia Mental Health, in 2017. In 2020, he decided to primarily focus his practice on treating adult men due to an identified need of practitioners willing to support the ever-growing community. He has a 15-year-old daughter he shares a passion for Star Wars with, and he's getting married in November to the love of his life. So, introducing Mr. Rene Garcia, aka the Chubby Therapist.
Hey, Chubby Therapist in the house. What's up, buddy?
How's it going? Thank you, man. I really appreciate you being here. I know we rescheduled a few times, and I blame you for each one of those. But
we are within, I don't know when this is being released, but we were like within 30 days of the wedding time. So things are crazy.
Yeah,
so
I think I'll try to release this on your wedding day, so you can just have it right there. So
perfect. I love it.
Yeah, that'll be your wedding gift because you're not getting anything else from me.
But me being there is I'll take it.
You're lucky you get me. No, so,
yeah, exactly. I'll take it. I'll take it all day.
But yeah, man. So let's start off, man. Just tell me, who is Rene Garcia?
Yeah, man. I'm a Pisces. Okay. No, I was originally born in Houston, Texas. I was born and raised there. I currently live in Dallas. I was always having kind of like a interest in psychology. But to me, I grew up as a second generation immigrant. My father is from South Texas, the Brownsville, Matamoros area. My mother's from Mexico and came over when she was about 8 or 9. And they moved from the valley. Any Rio Grande Valley people in Texas know the South Texas is a very specific area. And so when they moved to Houston, that's where they had my brother and I, and we spent the majority of our lives there. Got a daughter when I was 23. She's about to be 16 in about, a day, 2 days as of right now. And so that's insane. And I've been working in psychology probably since about 2000. Let's see, when did I get my first gig? 2010 is when I first started working in the mental health field. So it's been a really great journey, and I'm just really grateful to be in the mental health field right now. You can't go anywhere without someone talking about mental health. So I love it.
Yeah, nice, man. And a lot of times I talk to people, we're kind of the first generation immigrant coming in here, and I moved to Texas.
Your kid.
Yeah,
I'm your kid. I'm what happened. Yeah, your kid, your little baby kid. This is what they grew up to be.
God forbid, no. And so, I mean, obviously the struggles are different, the challenges are different.
Very different.
For one thing, English is usually not your first language. Sometimes my daughter's the same way, struggling. But what are some of the challenges you think you felt as a second generation Mexican?
Well, it's interesting because, I think if you were to like not know my name and you were just to close my eyes and hear me talk, you would probably think I was white, and so I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. We were one of the first Latino families in that neighborhood, and we moved there when I was about 3. So for people familiar with the Houston area, we lived a little bit closer to Greens Point, but then my father got a little bit better job and moved us up the street closer to Willowbrook Mall.
And for people who don't know Houston, Greens Point, that's one of the first parts of the town I moved into not knowing. And I got my apartment there, and I go to work on Monday, like, oh, I found an apartment, and I'm thinking, oh, it's $600. I got 500 square feet, a washer and dryer hookup, and a dishwasher. And for New England, that's like amazing. And then it's like, oh, you moved to Guns Point? I'm like, nobody told me that nickname before I rented it. So just to kind of give some background, Greens Point was not the nicest part of town that you want to live in. So.
Well, it was interesting. So you're right. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was not as, what it was today. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think we lived there. My brother went to school there, and we're about 6 years apart. And when I was about 3 is when we moved a little bit farther north up the road. And yes, it does have some rough sides to it, but I love the area. I always feel that they always paint Greens Point such a terrible. It's like the place where like Fox News always go to, like, here they're releasing Jordans and look at all these, these people. That's where they always go. But North Houston's a beautiful area, and yeah, the first neighborhood we lived in, I mean, that neighborhood that I basically grew up in, a lot of my friends, I was one of the few Latino kids in that group, and I love all the guys. A lot of these guys I'm still friends with today. I just had my bachelor party a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and a majority of those guys were still there. But I mean, there definitely was an identity thing. I think for me, it wasn't as difficult because I'm fair skinned. I'm kind of a funny guy, and I'm able to make friends easily. And for me, it was I was able to kind of be in a group of people around me, so I did feel supported. And so I didn't have a lot of the struggles that I think a lot of first generations, especially for people that English was not their first language. My parents grew up in a time where it just was not okay to be Latino. It wasn't be
Yeah.
okay to be Spanish speaking, and they came to this country, and assimilation wasn't really an option. It was that's what you did, and you assimilated to survive. And so, a lot of the now that we look back, really the racism and atrocities that happened in South Texas was, you would be embarrassed, beaten in front of the class if you spoke Spanish. And so, my parents and my family decided, what, we're going to have them learn English first. And now I look back, I think, I would have loved to have had Spanish be my first language. And I think I've struggled picking it up throughout my life. But, again, it's just the cards we're dealt, and we just make the best out of it. And really, what I found when I went to college is when I really kind of said, you know what, I really want to lean into this, identity, this Latinidad that I had a really big passion for. And I did, and I ended up having being involved with a lot of school organizations, whether it be the Hispanic Business Student Association, the Latino, I mean, just any Latino organization I was a part of. There's Latino fraternities I was interested for, and I just really engaged with it there, and I just really started kind of meeting people that culturally I could relate to. My guys back home, I love them, and yes, we have the same jokes, we have the same personality, but there was like a cultural gap between a lot of these guys that I did not have, and I felt that gap being fulfilled when I went to college and met a lot of other people who grew up with similar last names, parents with similar stories, and that was a really huge part of my identity, and still is to this day. So,
Yeah, it's funny because I was very similar. Although I wasn't growing up in like a predominantly white neighborhood, I was growing up very predominantly black neighborhood. So my whole
mm,
life, I was very much more wanting and going towards black culture than I was my Latino culture. I didn't like Spanish music. I didn't like speaking Spanish. And I grew up, I'm from Peru, so Spanish was my first language, and so I had
yeah.
to kind of when I got to college, the same thing. I felt, oh, I started to meet these Latinos and the pride that I see other Latinos acting, and it kind of drove me to want to be more. Same thing, and I kind of figured out my identity. And I think identity is always kind of an issue that a lot of us deal with. It's just
Oh,
it,
huge.
it's crazy, and it's I think about the same thing with my daughter, where we're doing what your parents did. We're in a predominantly white neighborhood. We're like one of the only Latinos in the whole neighborhood that we live in. All her friends here are white. She's playing soccer, and all the kids are white, pretty much, except for one other girl who's black, and
Mhm.
so it's like she's gonna grow up very different from the way I grew up, and
Oh,
um,
oh, and there were some experiences too about us getting into that neighborhood. And I mean, now my parents are older, and they I don't think they're kind of like held a little bit of stuff from us, and they tell us how, like, they had one house under contract, and just randomly, that house was no longer under contract because the homeowner associations had to jump in, and it took them a couple tries to get in the neighborhood that we wanted. And I remember, I don't mean to make this, sorry for this to be gross, Raul. You can cut this out if you want to, but I was a kid, and of course, me, like, I've always been able to kind of just meet friends pretty easily and make friends. And I had a bike, and I was going to go ride my bike to a friend's house, and I had to use the restroom really bad, but I didn't want to go all the way to the house. So inside the house, so I decided just to piss in the front yard because I was like, I need to, I didn't want to go, I didn't want to run all the way. It was a waste of time. My friend was waiting for me. Well, of course, we had neighbors who now they were wonderful friends, and we missed them. But back then, they were, I mean, their people were constantly looking out their window. And of course, as I rode off, my mom was there and my neighbor had called and said, "Did you know what your son did?" And I remember my mom coming back, my mom was super pissed. And I remember this conversation very clearly because she says, they already don't want us here. They already don't want us, a family. You cannot do that. That's
Mhm.
for one, it's disgusting. And number two, everybody's watching us. You cannot do that, And so this kind of like already heightened sense of like there are eyes on you, there are people watching you. Later on I just didn't give a shit, but at that moment I was kind of like, I didn't realize that, and so it was kind of a heightened sense of where are we.
Yeah, and Texas is a very interesting place because there's a level of racism that just kind of leads so in, and a lot of people they meet Mexicans third, second, or third generation. They don't speak Spanish. Like, how did you lose your culture? And it's like, dude, it was forced. And by 70s and 70s, 60s, if you had an accent, you said you couldn't do anything. And so parents raise their kids not to have an accent, not be anglicized as much as possible, give them Anglo names because otherwise things were too difficult for them, and you get to second or third generation, but that racism's still in there because your last name, your color, and as your parents kind of hid that from you, we're a different time now. But my daughter, I have to kind of explain it to her sometimes too, and say, hey, don't forget you're Latina, and even though you're very light skinned and your complexion's dark, and you have a French first name because her name's Evangeline, that Lopez is going to pop out and someone might think negatively of you. You know what I mean? It's kind of a life lesson that you still have to do now, even though things are very different.
I have the conversation with Lexi, my daughter, every once in a while, and I go, you're a third generation immigrant, you know that, right? Like, and because her mother's white and she's very fair skinned like myself, and and so there is this kind of like reminder of like, this is a cultural, okay, the language may not be that thing, but you can still experience culture outside of that language as well too, and remembering that you are part of this community and it's important. It was a huge part of my life that I kind of had to go and seek because there's just a huge generational divide. But it's still a reminder, especially as you have kids, to how do I remain culturally connected and connecting my children to this part of our history.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not doing great with the language part of it. She understands, but she doesn't speak. But I got to do a better job at it, and I keep beating myself over it.
Well, I mean, look, I think, look, it's really interesting. By the way, I knew this was gonna happen because you and I could talk for fucking hours, and
Yeah.
so I knew we are just gonna be talking about random stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
here we are talking about no sabo kids. But I think there is a very joyous side of me hearing the acceptance and uplifting of no sabo kids. And for those who are non-Spanish speaking, the no sabo kids is the kids who are basically with Spanish last names but just don't speak Spanish. And for me, I got called coconut my whole life. I got called, whatever it was, pocho, whatever. And this disconnect of culture. But I feel like there's this kind of like, why should we take on the colonizers language?
Mhm.
It's okay that someone's no sabo and you can still be connected to the culture. And I was like, I could have used you assholes like 20 years ago. I
Yeah.
could
Think
have
like I said,
used this kind of
everything's with
thing.
time, and everything with as we
Yeah,
move along, things get more progressive. People are more accepting. We're able to have these conversations, and I
sure.
think as people grow up, and I think it's probably going to eventually roll back into when you talk about therapy, how even just our generation, we're more knowledgeable and we research more before we do stuff, when we try to learn from our mistakes and raise our kids differently. Um,
100%.
but like, I mean, identity crisis is a big issue, and it's I know you're kind of saying, "Oh, we're going random and off think." No, this is stuff that people go through, and a lot of us go through it as well. And like you mentioned, it was college where you started kind of transitioning and being able to go back and say, "Okay, let me get more involved in your thing." But but colleges for a lot of us is a challenge. Let's talk. How you went to University of North Texas. How?
Yeah, man, go mean green. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Went to University of North Texas. It is in a little town called Denton, Texas, about 30 minutes north of Dallas. And for me, I wanted to go to college for music, and I wanted to be a music teacher because I played trombone, and I had always really not great teachers in school. And so side of me was like, well, I want to go and be a band director. It'd be really cool. And University of North Texas has an amazing public music program, is known for their jazz program. Nora Jones went there. I mean, a lot of different Grammy awards. And it was a little bit of far away from home. I kind of wanted to go far, but not super far away. And so for me, I just remember going there and being like, this is a beautiful campus. It was very green, very lush. And I just fell in love with the campus. I was like, yes, let's do it. Well, you go there and you realize I am not that good at trombone. I played trombone. I'm good, but I'm not as good. And these kids were unbelievable. And on top of it, too, there was something that I think there was like an imposter syndrome of like, okay, wow, there's kids that are like basically jazz artists and ready to start putting up albums playing. So I did the marching band one year and then I just undeclared, but I just didn't have a lot of direction when I was in college, but I had a lot of fun and I met a lot of really great people. And I had this kind of thing happen where I kind of felt like, I was the only one up there. I didn't, have a lot of friends up there. I didn't know anybody there. So I just kind of latched on to a guy that was in band with me. And then he had a friend. And then you start meeting all their friends. And then you start getting involved with these organizations. And that to me made me feel very much at home. And so when I'm, talking to, my daughter about going to college and stuff like that, I always say, "Hey, look, by the way, I'm sorry, my dogs are going crazy behind me,
Oh,
so
I
if you
don't
hear
hear
the
anything,
dogs."
so it's all good.
Okay, good, good, good. I can hear it. I was telling my kid, like, when she goes to college, just to go check out organizations because that was a huge thing for me. And so meeting people, getting involved in those organizations, I mean, it was very much like a part of home. And I remember first, I won't name the person, but I now remember exactly who it was. They always said something on the lines of, because we're talking about family and stuff. And I was like, telling some experiences, and she goes, "Dang, Renee, you're more Mexican than I am." And I was like, in my 18, 19 years, had never heard anybody say that because my whole life they'd be like, "Oh, you're the white guy," or whatever. And so it just felt very much at home, and I felt very connected. And so college was a really great experience. I took some, victory laps. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I finally settled on a degree in sociology with a minor in business. And through those sociology courses, I took a couple of meaningful courses, one being a class on interpersonal violence, like violence between domestic violence, and was actually in with a friend of ours, Dana. And that teacher was so moving to me. She was a therapist, and I was just like, man, that's so awesome. I would love to do something like that. But by that time, Lexi was pretty much born, and I needed to start working. Well, I got a job and I hated it immediately. It was during the crash of the economy, and I was gas was $4 an hour. I got hired because they just needed a Hispanic person in that position, and I was hating it. I wasn't getting paid anything. I couldn't pass the test to get that job. Well, my mom was working for a university, Our Lady of the Lake University, based out of San Antonio. And she goes, "Hey, this program I think would be really good for you. Have you ever thought about it?" Well, I go to the information. I fell in love with the program. And sure enough, it's a Master of Psychology with a focus on marriage and family therapy. It's a 3-year program. Moved back to Houston to do it. And it was just the best decision I could have made. It was everything I needed, everything I wanted, the type of training I got, other therapists, I explained it to them, and they're like, "Dude, our training was like nothing like that." I had 3 job offers by the time I graduated, and it was just, I don't know. I loved it. I wish I could go back and do it again because it was just really the best program. I don't think I could have asked for a better program. So
And you were taking that in Houston, but you said you had Lexi at that point, and she was in Dallas.
yeah, so her mom and I were never married. We decided that when she was born, we're going to co-parent, and we were not in love. And so we said, you know what, we shouldn't make this decision. So that was really tough. She decided to move to Texarkana to have her parents there support her, and then I moved down from Dallas to Houston to start my master's program. And so there, she would stay with Lori for her mom for a majority of the time, and then she'd come for me for a little bit of time, and then back and forth from that area. And so we still stayed pretty involved, but ultimately we both agreed that we would meet up eventually in Dallas so I could be closer to her. And thank God that eventually happened in 2014. And Best decision ever. Best decision ever to us to get closer together. And it's just been, I don't care what my job is. I guess I got to stay here for a couple more years, and then we can go wherever. Because I just love being close to her and being a part of her life. And so, yeah, it was definitely a huge thing for me to get back up here to Dallas as soon as possible.
You say you're having trouble passing tests for that first job. Was
Yeah.
was that a therapist test or is it licensing something
No.
different?
Great question, Raul. Great question. So I got hired with zero prospects so I graduated my undergrad and I had zero job prospects. One thing that if any college kids, or if you have kids that are about to go to college, it's all about internships. And you got internships, do internships around sophomore, junior year, get networking by that time. I did none of that. I was very misdirected for my undergraduate degree years. I was working a restaurant and I thought I'd be a part of this and just work the restaurant business the rest of my life. I waited tables, was a server, I bartended a little bit, and I love that experience. And the lifestyle is great. Money's fast and quick, but it's just a really hard life because you're working, basically Tuesday through Sunday, and very few days off. If you worked in a bar, you just always smelled like bleach because everything had to be bleached, and it was just kind of got old. But I decided to take a year off before I graduated. I didn't know what I was doing. My mom was very supportive. My dad was a little cautious and skeptical, but I took some time off and got back into school and was very more directed at that time. So I graduated and I got hired as a financial planner with a very large life insurance company because I realized, and I figured this out because they hired a gay guy for the exact same reason they hired me, the Latino guy, is they said they wanted to have a gay guy to go to the gay community. We got to have a Latino guy to go to the Latino community, which is a weird kind of like, I don't know if there's any like labor board referral that I should make or any kind of racist
Hey,
hiring,
my company was trying to be way too diverse on purpose. Can you punish them?
How dare you give me a job
Yeah.
based off my last name?
Uh,
But yeah, I realized that, and in order to do that, you have to pass a life insurance producer license, life and health producer license. And I remember my old roommate Will from Denton, really sweet guy, and I remember going through all this stuff, and I had to go through this huge book. And back then, there wasn't like a lot of video stuff or online stuff, so it was textbook, and then you sit down and take the test. And I remember him looking over at me and being like, "Dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? I cannot see you doing this." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Dude, what are you doing? This is not you. This is not you." And I just been like, okay, I know it's not me, but I need to do it for right now. And sure enough, I took that test the first time and I failed it. And I remember the people in the office being like, "Hey, Buckaroo, you're gonna get it next time, pal. Oh, that test is terrible. You're gonna be all right." And then I failed it a second time. And then the conversations changed dramatically. There'd be like, "So you failed it a second time? Really?" Like, it was, like, not supportive at all. It's kinda like, "Oh, this guy's a fucking idiot," you know? Like, what is he gonna do? So, that's when I just basically just stopped. I mean, they weren't paying me. It was basically an internship, and you're supposed to, like, get this license and then start building a clientele. "Hey, do you have any friends? Do you have any parents, any family members you can sell life insurance to?" So I was like, "Well, they're not paying me, so why am I driving all the way out here?" So then I started doing the waiting tables and bartending thing more and more, and I was definitely freaking out because Lexi was already born, and I didn't have any prospects, and I was very scared. The economy was complete garbage, and my mom was just like I said, she sent this program over to me, and I had always been interested in psychology. I took an AP psychology class in high school, and it was interesting to me, but again, my father's the second oldest of six, second first oldest male, and his dad died when he was 12, and his life was, I got to support, I got to provide for my family. And so he worked as an accountant in the business world, and my mother has a degree in accounting. He put my mom through college, and so I came from a business background, and so I just thought, okay, well, I'll just go in business and let's see what that works. But that was not me at all. Was a musician. I was a little bit more creative. I was the emotional one. I just wanted to that just wasn't me. And I felt like that life insurance gig was going to be something that I just wasn't going to like. And so when I found out this program, I was like, oh, I can talk to people and I can get paid for it and I can, kind of make a difference. Like that was something that nobody in my family had ever had before, done before. And so it was just a really awesome, really, really awesome experience. And I don't know, I was just really grateful I was just really grateful that I was able to find that program and have the conversations I had with the professors and for it to just be everything I needed at that moment. So,
It's funny you talk about the financial advising insurance job that you get, because I think that's a very common job that a lot of people get out of college. It's also kind of, I think, a little predatory as well for a lot of outcoming people out of college, where they try to get you. They tell you you're only
yeah.
going to get paid commission. They expect you to pay for your licensing, and they say, "Oh, once you pass it, we'll reimburse you," kind of deal. I don't know if that's
Oh, yeah.
if they had that you do that, and then they're like, "Okay, now send me a list of 100 of your friends and family members, and you're gonna start working your clientele like that." And they get a lot of us. I was at one of those interviews too, where it was a group interview, and they tell me kind of felt like multi-level marketing interview
Oh,
for a
yeah.
little bit of it, where I didn't feel at ease, and I was like, I didn't take it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was look, it's great information, and I'm glad I, did it because, like, you need to know that stuff, especially as a family. But yeah, it was very much exactly like that. Like, hey, we just need a guy here, and we need your people, that
Mhm,
kind of thing. And it didn't feel, I don't know, and I remember me talking to another Latino guy there, and he was very much into like he golfed, so everybody was like, oh, let's bring out this guy, he's the golfer, and I was like, "Oh, I don't fucking golf. I don't golf at all. Like, I don't do that stuff." And it felt exactly like a cheesy business place that I was like, "I don't want to be here."
mhm. And
So,
it sucks being at a job where you put a label on you right away. It's like that
yeah.
office episode, like, "Oh, you're the fire guy." It's like, you don't wanna go to a job and you're the Latino guy. You're the Latino guy that doesn't play golf, and he's the Latino guy that does play golf. That's gotta feel like shit.
Yeah.
But you ended up going to, get your master's in, Our Lady of the Lake, and you said you ended up getting job prospect. Is that when you started working with, people with substance use disorders?
Yeah, so it's a 3-year program, and I was in my freshman year. I was in my not freshman year. It was a 3-year master's program. I was in the first year, and I was waiting tables at a local Papa Dough. For all of my Texas people know what that is, but it's a Cajun restaurant. And I remember working there, and you go around for your, first day and they're like, "What do you do? And I was like, "Oh, I'm in grad school and maybe one day I want to be a therapist, maybe like a psychologist." And I remember a new guy that got hired and the manager joking around with each other and be like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Talk to people and help them with their feeling?" And they're like laughing at me, like in the orientation. And that was like immediately like a red flag of, oh, I gotta get out of here. I don't want to be here. And so decided not to. I was living at home, so it wasn't a big thing for me to quit that job. It was actually the first job I ever just quit because I hated it. People there were terrible, and I didn't like the restaurant. And I had come from a restaurant that was completely different. It was a different culture, and so I was like, I gotta find something. Well, it just so happened that there was a second year student who sent out an email through the email blast of the school because it was like a small cohort, and it said, "Hey, I own a drug and alcohol outpatient facility. So it's an intensive outpatient program, which is basically like the last structured level of programming that insurance will cover, which means it's like basically like a night class, Monday through Thursday, couple hours a night, and then you go back and you do it. So basically, people who are entering this program either A, are coming from really high levels of care, like detox, rehab, or whatever, or their drug and alcohol use isn't that significant. So they just need something to kind of help them and understand kind of a night class program type of thing. So he owned a couple locations of this and was kind of like an affiliate of a bigger company. And he said, "Hey, I'm looking for an intern. If anybody wants to be interested in helping drug and alcohol people, I'd love for to be a part of it." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds really fucking interesting. I want to definitely check that out." And the interview was so funny because I am not in recovery myself, but they want to know about any like drug or alcohol use experience. And I was like, yeah, I tried this and oh, and I was around. That's the most odd. This is the weirdest interview process. I was like, referencing any kind of drug or alcohol experience I'd ever had in my life. And luckily, he was a really sweet guy. Gave me my first gig and helped me get my internship license. So with these licenses, just because you get your license doesn't mean you're automatically a therapist. You have to get the license, be an intern or an associate for a little bit, and then it gets fully licensed. So I got my internship license in 2010 for a chemical dependency counselor. So you listed out all that alphabet soup behind my name earlier. So the LCDC is the licensed chemical dependency counselor. That was the first license I ever got it in 2010. And by the time I graduated in 2012, it was fully licensed. So I was graduating as a fully licensed chemical dependency counselor. And that license at that time, you just needed an associate's degree to have it. So I was graduating with my master's in line trying to get my LPC, my licensed professional counselor, and my LMFT, which is my licensed marriage and family therapist licenses. So even with those being internship level, I was still having those on top of my LCDC, on top of this great face. I had a number of different, job offers full time by the time I graduated. One from my internship spot, one from this counselor who wanted me to help him grow, and then another one from a really big hospital system in Houston called Memorial Hermann. And so I ended up taking the job at Memorial Hermann, and it was really tough to leave, my mentor and the guy kind of helped me through this, but he got it. He understood it. They had a little bit more prospects going with them, and they were able to pay me a little bit more. And they were also able to help me complete my licenses because even in the internship license space, you have to have a supervisor who signs off on your hours and says, hey, this person is a trustworthy therapist. And if you don't have a facility that provides that, that means you pay it out of your own pocket. And
Mm.
so it kind of absorbed the cost. And I was able to work there for a couple of years and get my licenses. And so it helped out tremendously doing that. So graduated in 2012, had those prospects and ended up staying with that facility, that hospital system for, I'd say almost like 4 years, 4.5 years. So yeah, it was a really good experience. I worked at a couple of different outpatient facilities and did a couple of rounds in inpatient, but I really love working with families. I graduated as a marriage and family therapist and worked with family systems. And it was just a really great experience working there. A lot of great clinicians, a lot of great doctors who respected what you had to say, physicians who were talking about 12-step recovery, which is really awesome. And wanted to hear what therapists had to say. That collaborative nature is I mean, that to me is one of the most joyful working experiences that I had is just people that respected you as a clinician. It's a really great feeling.
Yeah, I think it's funny too because we see a lot of the shift when it comes to doctors like MDs, where they're now incorporating the aspect of mental health into their discussions. Whereas before it's
Sure.
just like, oh, you're hurt, we're gonna fix you, or we're gonna try to do this. And now they're like, you want to talk to therapist, a therapist specifically for this, and it's more, as someone who's dealing with their own health thing, they constantly ask you, how are you feeling? That was one of the first things my doctor told me when I got my liver diagnosis. Like, to start off, how do you feel? You know what I mean? Just instead of just telling me what's wrong with me. So it's a lot more accepting, and I think it's for the better, and I'm glad you were able to get that. And so you got this job, you're working. Um, did you have to go back to school, or is PhD something that you need to do now, or is it just kind of like a maybe?
So great question, Raul. Really wanted to do the PhD. And I remember talking to the only other guy in my cohort about it. And he was an older guy, not an older guy. He was definitely maybe like 10 or 15 years older than me. And I remember telling him, he's like, hey, man, you should go for your PhD. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to, 5 or 6 years. It's a lot of school. And I remember him saying, like, you don't want to be 5 or 6 years, be my age and looking back and regretting it. And there was a side of me that I really wish I would have stuck with it and gone through the PhD. The main decision for me was my daughter. Um, if I would not have taken the job up in Dallas and gone for my PhD, I know I would have had a successful career. I know I would have been a great psychologist. And I know if I were to stay in Houston, I would probably live in a be living a very different life right now, but I wouldn't have my daughter. And yeah, I mean, at the core of it, me moving up to Dallas to be closer to her, she was like by that time 6 or 7, just to be able to go to lunch with her on Fridays, just be able to take her out on the weekend and just be there. If she got sick or if her mom couldn't take her to school or do something, I could go and be around her and just be present in her life. Um, that was the reason I didn't do my PhD. And yes, I think now there's a lot more online options, and I think it's very costly too. I think I can't remember if you've had a. I think you have. I think you had Luis on here. I need to listen to his episode, but you know, I think you got to have two people in your life: people that can help you dream about things, and then people that can help you afford those dreams.
Mhm.
Because I feel like there's a lot of people that, especially young people of color, that are taking on all these student loans and all these debts and trying to get these titles and get all these accomplishments, and then they're left at the end of the day with thousands of dollars in the hole of how do we pay this stuff back? And yes, you're making these accomplishments, but honestly, man, it was expensive. It's gonna be another cost, and I already have a ton of student loans, and so it was a couple of different reasons. The main reason being Lexi, but the second reason is being it was just like I couldn't afford it. I can't
Mhm.
just keep adding this stuff on and have this endless bill. So yeah, I would have loved to do it, and if you can find someone to pay for your PhD, hey, good for you. But I don't regret it because I get to, my daughter, we get to laugh about things, and we have our relationship, and she doesn't have to wonder what I think about her, or I only get to see her through certain time frames or whatever. She knows I'm here for her, and she knows I'm present in her life, and that was really the decision for me to not do that PhD.
Yeah, it's funny because you always hear that like, oh, you're if you don't do it now, 5 years from now, you're gonna wish you do that. And I kind of had that same cycle with an MBA. I kept saying, oh, I'm gonna work on getting my MBA in like 2010 when I moved to Houston, and then we decided to go buy a house. And I was like, well, I'm gonna hold off until next year because I have all this money that I'm putting towards the house. And we ended up losing that house and not buying the house. And then I
Yeah.
ended up getting laid off. So I was like, okay, well, I can't afford to do anything now. Then fast forward a few years later, I'm like, okay, let me try doing this again. And that's when I ended up having my daughter. And I was like, okay, let me fast forward again. And then I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. And this was like right before we decided to move up north. And I was like, well, I can't do it now because I'm going to move up north. And I do all that stuff. And by this point, what used to be a 15 to $20,000 program is now like $100,000 program. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm not spending $100,000 for an MBA, where at this point it might be a 40 to $100,000 salary increase, but it's still like too much to put in right now. I'm still paying off my undergrad student loans, and
Yeah.
then I was like,
And
I'll try it again now. And then I'm like, my health issues. I'm like, do I want to waste my time? I'm like, I'm having enjoying my daughter. I'm having the same thing. And at the end of the day, that work life balance, my life is happier being able to be with my daughter, do stuff with her, than whatever extra money I might have made from that. And I have to just admit and not chase that. Feels like like a drug. Oh, you're trying to chase that dragon, try to get that high, and feel like you succeeded. And sometimes it's
oh
okay
yeah.
to say, no, I think I'm good where I'm at, and I'm happy with what I'd like more, but I don't have to punish myself for some of the decisions I didn't make.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think for me it was, and I had to kind of like check my ego a little bit of
Hmm.
like, why it, who am I doing this for, and
Hmm.
what am I doing this for? Is it going to make me a better therapist? Mm, I don't know. I don't know. Will I be able to charge people more? Sure. Um, but like, what will the job entail? Like, like what will I be doing differently? I'd still be able to talk to people. I'll still be able to connect with people. And yeah, for me, it was like, I don't know, it wasn't like I could write prescriptions. I still couldn't write, I'm not like, even though some people call me and ask me for drugs, like, hey, can you give me some Xanax? No, I cannot. I'm not that. No, not at all. That's not what I do. And so, yeah, there wasn't really a huge benefit for me at that time. And even now, I have to keep reminding myself, like, you can do a lot of shit right now with what you got.
Hmm.
There's a lot of options and stuff that I can do in my career. And so I think a lot of it, the core of it is just my ego of saying I just wanted to be
Hmm.
Dr. Rene Garcia, like just the fucking like that's right, I
Hmm.
did that, I'm an expert in this field, and that's just a lot of ego, and that was at the core of it, just an insecurity I had. I always felt like it wasn't enough. I always felt like I needed to do more. Even to this day, I feel like I need to keep piling. What am I not doing?
Mhm,
And I think that's more me, and I had to accept that and realize I can't keep putting my family or myself in a deeper hole because I'm trying to make myself feel better. That can be addressed in a different type of way.
mhm. Yeah, it's something, you're saying it's like you're chasing to get that doctor, you wanna have something to accomplish it, and then I think in time, your experience speaks for itself, and you're able to leverage that experience to become more
Yeah.
successful. And I think once I started realizing, hey, I can't blame the fact that I don't have an MBA on why I'm not as successful as I was, and started changing my mentality and saying, no, the reason I'm not successful is because I'm not chasing what I want more and just accepting what I'm being given. And I started being more bold with my not just career choices, but like what I'm asking for at work, and then what's the next job, what's the salary I'm expecting, and what's the next job going to provide me to help me move into the future position, as opposed to just saying, oh, I got to get going through the same thing because you felt kind. I always felt kind of like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. It must be because I don't have an MBA. Because everybody tells me to
Yeah.
get an MBA, and now I'm making a crap ton more money. I've doubled my salary in like 5 years, and it's really just because I took some risk, I took some challenges, and I still don't have my MBA. And I still think
Yeah.
there's a lot more for me to do that, but I had to accept that. And like you said, check your ego and start working and accepting that. So, kudos to you, and kudos to me, I guess. So, for,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough thing to like just be okay with where you're at and just like trusting the process a little bit.
mhm,
And I think that you said something really interesting to me is like that idea of being bold and like being able to say like, okay, like i- is this role or job serving me? It's serving my talents. And I had to leave a place. I was only there for a short period of time, but I was at a job that I hated. And the writing was on the wall because they'd say like, "Oh, we've gone through like 7 or 8 therapists in like a couple 2 years," and I was like, "Oh, that's not good." I came from a place where people stayed there for 15, 20 years, and here's a place they couldn't keep people here for like more than a couple months. Like that's already a bad sign. And then you get in there and you're like, "Oh, this is not anything that's enjoyable to me at all. It's not meeting any of my needs." And I think that like listening to yourself, being able to watch the writing on the walls, um, and trusting the patient, trusting that process. Mentorship's a big one too, making sure you have people around you that are doing things bigger and better than you and recognizing that that's not a threat, that they figured the system out. And so you got to figure out what they know. That's a big thing too. I'm not trying to, I feel like this is me moving into like advice giving. So I don't want to do that. But all that stuff was really helpful for me to realize that, oh, this place I don't need to be at. I need to be a different place.
yeah. And in all fairness, your understanding of what made you, and I think a lot of the issues for a lot of us of not knowing how to succeed is really in not just knowing where we want to go, but knowing what we don't want to go, and
Mm,
admitting where we don't want to go. Because a lot of us will say,
sure.
I'm fine here. It's paying my bills, but I'm not happy." And sometimes you got to be able to say, I'm not happy here. Let me try something different and work my way through it. And getting to where you want to get sometimes is more about understanding where you don't want to go as opposed to where you do want to go. Because all of us want to
Yeah.
be successful, all of us want to make money, but we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. And as you start figuring it out, that path becomes clearer where you have to go and what you need to do to get there. So, it's not just advice giving. And in all fairness, this fucking podcast is about advice giving, but through your personal journey. So, but like I just mentioned, you started going
Yeah.
through all your stuff and you went through stuff that you didn't like and you realized what you didn't like. And then eventually you decided what your specialty is. And your specialty
Yeah.
is focused on mental health. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So about 2017 through 2019, I had a steady flow of clientele from a couple of referral sources, but they always tell you if you want to have a private practice, you have to kind of be very specific about what types of people are being sent over to you and what's being referred to you. So about the end of 2019, I said, look back, and about 80 to 85% of my clientele was just single adult men, some of them being some of the guys that you would just never expect to be in a therapy room. And so I said, you know what? Obviously, this is something that's kind of, calling to me, and spoke to some friends and kind of changed up my marketing. And I said, 2020, this is the year it's going to happen. 2020 is my year. I'm going to change it. I'm going to, change up the name, put a tagline on it, Garcia Mental Health, strengthen dialogue. I wanted to really put this kind of like, powerful message. And then, as we all know, the pandemic hit and it went crashing into the mountain. I got no referrals. Early on, it slowed down to a halting, a stop. And, back then you had to, and I still think you do have to do special kind of training before you could do telehealth. Thankfully, I did complete that in February just out of sheer coincidence that I was like, maybe I'll offer this for some people. Maybe some people will do it. And then April, I started getting calls. And then June, I started getting more calls. And then I want to say by like July or August, I was like on my first waiting list. And so that I felt very grateful for that. People were wanting resources. I think people who had never had to face their mental health issues really had no choice at that moment because we were so isolated and had no clue what was going on. A lot of caretakers of their family were losing their jobs, losing their that I we talked earlier about identity. This identity of a caretaker. For a lot of families, can be the man in a heterosexual relationship, and obviously that's not the case all the times. But I think again, you saw a lot of guys that didn't ever think that they would be losing their job, lost their job. How are they going to care for their families? How are they going to care for themselves? If they got sick, if they were going to survive. I mean, we all heard, I remember, for better or worse, we heard about the most unique cases, like, oh, there's a 28-year-old ex tennis player who weighed 120 pounds, died from COVID. And you're like, oh, I got my cheeseburger in my hand. Like, what do you mean? If it gets good, if it gets that guy, it's going to get me. And so it was just this constant scary, you got to stay in. And I get it, what they were doing, but I also think it was, looking back, I mean, it was just a very, we didn't know what was going on. And so I think that affected a lot of people. And I think they were really, for the first time, uh, demanding some mental health services. And so I was able to build a lot of clientele during that time. And people were wanting to utilize my services. And I was very grateful that I was able to provide that to them. And I needed it myself too. I needed to make sure I was okay. And, I remember watching the Avengers and getting like a panic attack, when Thanos snapped his fingers because I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening right now. I gotta turn this off. I gotta turn this off. And so, I think it was just a very scary time, but I think coming out of that, it allowed me to further dive deeper into this and provide that service and say, look, there are right now, there is a number of men out there who are lost, who are not getting jobs, who are lonely, who people are discarding, and the ones that are being discarded are being picked up by the most scummiest, creepiest, shittiest people ever and saying, hey, come join my culty, way of talking about things and living their life. And I feel like because these people have been discarded, they're turning into different, weirder, more awful people. And I wanted to say, how can I combat that? And I wanted to be a cisgendered straight male who is able to talk about feelings and emotions, able to talk about working out in jujitsu, able to talk about going out and getting beers, able to talk about trans rights, able to talk about mental health issues, being transparent and vulnerable to people. And I felt that if I can just continue to remain in this space and provide that, that space for people in need, I'm doing my part to curb these further discarded people out from this community. Because say what you want, and I get it, I credit a lot of the Me Too movement of holding men accountable for their actions. And I think absolutely we need to help men accountable for their actions. But after we hold them accountable for their actions, how are we working on their healing? Because we're very quick to say, fuck this guy, lock him up, they need to be out, they need to be pushed out of our society, but no one wants to talk about, okay, so how do they get better? How do we give them chances to not be that dangerous, terrible thing? How do we give them a chance to be loved and develop and grow and vulnerable and fearful in a way that's not aggressive or dangerous? And so I think that to me, if the people who have been hurt by these men don't want anything to do with them, I understand that. And I'm not going to force them to do that. But that doesn't mean I can't provide that space if they're willing to join me. I'm not there to fix them. I'm not there to push them into healing. I'm there to provide them a space that if they want to heal, I'm that guy and I want to do that with them.
It's as a Latino man, mental health is never really pushed upon at an
Sure.
early age, and as we get older, I'm more accepting to it. I'm more open to it, and we continually see in these interviews where people talk about their mental health and seeking a
Yeah.
therapist, and it kind of encouraged me too. Where I reached out and am seeking a therapist at the moment as well. And it's funny because they keep asking you, "What's wrong? Is there anything wrong?" Well, nothing wrong, but I figure let
No,
me
there's a lot of stuff wrong. Well, let's just be real.
Oh
There's
yeah,
a
well,
lot of
there's
stuff
a
wrong.
lot of
There's
stuff wrong with it, but you
You're like
know,
nothing specifically. It's
nothing
a
specific.
cascade of
But they're like, "Is there anything serious? Are you depressed?" I'm like, "No, not at all." But I know there's benefit, and I'm sure there's stuff that I can work on to improve myself. So
yeah.
let me take advantage of my insurance that I'm not using right now to take advantage of it. And so, do you feel like that for men, it's harder to break that shell or get them to actually come in, and seek help, or maybe has the pandemic kind of helped that because people, like you said, were more scared?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways people come to therapy, and a lot of the times it tends to be their partners that are calling in and saying, "Hey, I'd like to get an appointment for my husband, boyfriend, partner, or whatever," and that's okay. I really don't care how people call that first session. I just want them to come to that first one and know that I'm not an asshole. I'm not here to diagnose you. My office is not stuffy. It's just a really kind of plain room. I'm not asking you to lay down on a couch and take notes. I just want to talk to you and get to know you. And so I think there is obviously still a pretty big stigma about exactly what you said right there. Okay, if I go to something, that means something is wrong. Therefore, I am wrong. Therefore, I am not right. Therefore, I am a problem. And so that's one of the hardest things is to really almost surgically separate the problem for the person. The problem's the problem. The problem may be a part of the person's life, but that doesn't mean that that's their identity. And so, as long as I can get them in there, even just to, hey, you have 5 minutes. Let me just chat with you about it. Because a lot of times I get, well, he may want help, but I don't know if he's willing to go. I get it. Have him give me a call, shoot me a text. I'm just wanting to get to know you. And then once we get in that room, then we can figure something out. I always kind of find it funny too, whenever clients are like, Renee, I don't have anything bad to say. Nothing bad happened. And I'm like, look, I don't want to, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. You don't have to come in here and always talk that something's terrible. It's a space. It's absolutely a space. And any good therapist will tell you their job is to work themselves out of a job. So you want to provide them a space that if they need the healing, they need the development, it's there. And one day it's not going to be needed. And I love that when clients are like, hey, I think I'm good. I think I've reached this point and maybe I'll come see you once a month, or maybe I'll see you like in a couple months, or I'll just let you know when I need another appointment. And you just say, great, absolutely. No problem. I'm here for you. Let me know what resources you need. And that's just really how that process goes. And so um, yeah, I think as far as Latino men go, look, I wish I could sit here and tell you that my practice is full of nothing but Latinos. It is not. But that doesn't mean it's not something that I want to continue to work on and be a representative of our community and also get other people who are representations of our community out there saying, hey, us as people need to be talking about this stuff. And we have a lot of great resources for the Latino community out right now. And I think I do feel a change. And I feel a young generation, not only wanting to talk about these things, like demanding mental health services, which I think is great. And so I think we just need to do a better job of making sure they know where we're at and obviously making things more affordable for sure that everybody can go and get to these services.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of stuff that we go through, not just men or I know, but a lot of us
Sure.
go through stuff. But one of the things that you've kind of helped me out a lot recently was for full transparency for everybody, you're one of my fraternity brothers. We're in the same fraternity. Um, it's also I think a lot of the people I interview start from my fraternity brother. I'm using my network to kind of start
So it's
this
like a
off.
life insurance thing. You're just
Yeah.
like, okay, who's close by?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I know you. And so, in all fairness, it's helped me motivate myself to do better in my life because I see all these successful fraternity brothers. But one of the things you started in our fraternity was a group for fathers, for dads,
Yeah.
that I think has been tremendous, at least for me, to be able to not just um, listen in and ask questions and get advice, but also talk to others and see how others do things and how others
Yeah.
work through things. Do you think being a father has helped you out in your specialty?
Oh my God. Yeah. I think Yeah, I think it's been a life changing experience for a number of different ways. I think it's clearly made me a better man. Clearly helped me become a more empathetic therapist. I think doing that dad's group, man, I need to be better at consistency of it, but life's crazy right now. But there was a group of dads in our organization that were it was just basically a Facebook group, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if we had like monthly meetings? And I think there's an old saying from an older guy in our organization that said, turn ideas into actions, right? And I love that idea of like, okay, yeah, if this is something I would like, and we start doing these monthly dad meetings, and it was just to me, it was beautiful seeing a group of men who you would think these are macho dudes, like we have a lot of Northeast brothers, yo, I'm mad, proud of my son, you know what I'm saying? Like, talking like that and hearing them basically like gush over like how proud and loved they are of being a dad and loving their kids and I'm in Texas, so seeing these really Mexican machismo guys that they'll build you a house before they tell you that I love you, that's kind of thing, but then openly talking about how proud they were to see their kids score a soccer goal or something like that. I mean, that was a sign to me that I need to keep doing this and keep offering that space. And so I think fatherhood is the key as well too of how do we not only provide men to heal, but almost incentivize fatherhood? Because the more we can get men being excited to be dads and understanding the importance of that role in a child's life, like it is absolutely necessary for you to be involved in their life. You are needed. They want you, they want to be a part of your life. And it's like a privilege to be a dad. It was such a huge part of who I am. And even Lydia, my fiance, is like, Lexi's the best part of you easily, and she's true because I just feel like when you have that person and her responsibility is yours, and when she's away from you it's the worst, and when she's with you it's the best, and you just want to see every little aspect of their life and see them grow and seeing them accomplish things. It's just such an amazing thing. And so yeah, I could go on and on about fatherhood, and it's something I want to involve with my practice. I kind of made a little teaser announcement thing of it earlier a couple months ago, but I'm definitely going to make it a part of my practice. Trying to nail out some further details about it. But yeah, fatherhood has been everything for my life, and also I've been doing a lot of college gig stuff and going around colleges here in these last couple months, and it's amazing hearing this Generation Z talk about like wanting to be parents and excited to be parents. Like, these young kids with the broccoli haircuts and the long hair and the hats, and I'm excited to be a dad, and that to me seems like just amazing. So I don't know. We could talk the whole day, I'm sure, about fatherhood, but to answer your question, it has been the linchpin of uh, who I am as a therapist and as a man is definitely been being a dad.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely gonna have to have a special episode for Father's Day where, where we talk fatherhood and stuff because it's different. I mean, the
Yeah,
way I was raised compared to how I'm raising my daughter is completely different. The exact, even my dad, who when growing up very strong machismo, he was his way, his way or the highway. And he talks to me now and he's like, man, I wish I raised you guys the way you raised Eva. The way you talk to her. He's like, I didn't have a dad. I didn't know what I was doing. And, I tried my best. And I'm glad you guys still love me after everything. But, the way you talk to her and the way you explain things to her and the way you don't just blow up on her and, that you can apologize for when you do blow up on her and show
sure.
vulnerability. He's like, it's different. And yeah, I think it takes a lot of courage for an old machismo immigrant to be able to open up in his 60s and be honest with me about, hey, I didn't know what I was doing either, and I tried my best, and so that comes a long way too. But I think it's all it's all relative, and I think it's all helpful. So, like I said, for me, I thought
Yeah.
that group that you created has helped me out a lot, and I even tell my people, like, to me, I feel like group therapy sessions sometimes it's just us letting go and talking, and telling our
Yeah.
worries, man. It's wonderful. So
Well, it's interesting because I remember talking to another I forget who it was, but I was they were not part of our organization, and I was like, yeah, you probably need like a good dads group or something like that. I have one for my organization, and they're like, where do I find that? And I was like, oh God, forgot that what a privilege we have that this space is so available to us because I think there are a lot of I think there are like a million moms groups, like so many moms groups, so much mom culture. And it makes me jealous because I just wish dads had the same thing, and I feel like, again, it's a weird way of saying it, but it's like, again, we need to incentivize being dads and
mhm,
incentivize being fathers, and I think the way we do it is creating these spaces, respecting them that, these are dads who wanna get better, and that's my little tagline is that this is not a place for us to judge each other, it's not a place for one dad to be better than the other, we're just trying to survive parenthood, and
mhm,
even I'll give a transparency too, like, I'm not my daughter lives with her mom and her stepdad, even that experience of, my role versus the stepdad's role and being able to trust that she's in a home that is being loved in and being able to capitalize when she's with me that time there as opposed to counting down the seconds when she needs to leave. How am I indulging in every second that she is here? And so yeah, anyways, I would love to be a part of that because I think it's such a huge thing and I want to continue to have that be a part of not only my practice but just my life of continuing to prioritize and incentivize being a dad.
yeah. Awesome, man. Well, one of the things I always like to ask when I get to the near the end of the interview is, if you could go back in time and talk to young Renee and give him some piece of advice, what's something you'd tell yourself?
You need that extra pan dulce? No, I would say trust your gut. I think there was a lot of times that I knew exactly what I needed to do, but I did not trust my gut. And my gut was looking back about 99% correct. So very insecure in decision making. But yeah, just trust your gut. And it's okay to have regrets because the people that say, I lived a life with no regrets, man, I just think that's insane. You had to gotta have regrets because that's what helps you make better decisions in the future.
Amen. That was awesome. Well, thank you, Mo, and trust me, for someone who's always had a big gut, I never listened to it either. So it's uh, but but thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. As always, I love talking to you, and I definitely hope to have you back on with more insight in the future. But for everyone else listening, thank you so much. As always, I appreciate the support, and I hope you'll join me next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish. Thanks, bro.
No worries, man. Appreciate it.